استفاد برو بلاد زاي يقول بالسعير والباطن وليزخامة والسفن يقول بالسعير والباطن وليزخامة والسفن.
These mysterious lands, which seem to rise out of the clouds, are the Highlands, situated in the east of the island of New Guinea to the north of Australia. The western half of the island is Irian Java, part of Indonesia, and this, the eastern half, is Papua New Guinea. The country includes over 1,400 islands, both large and small. In PNG, as this country is popularly known, there are around 1,000 distinct ethnic groups speaking over 800 different languages. The fierce nature of these tribes, the practice of cannibalism, and the fact that some groups cut off the heads of their enemies made this island a fearful place, which travelers tried to avoid. Sailors who did find themselves sailing close to these coasts told of how the natives had attacked them from the cliffs, leaving the decks of their ships covered in arrows and spears and crew members wounded. New Guinea was a remote place that no one dared approach, and so it remained unexplored for many years. In fact, until the start of the 19th century, when the English and the Germans took possession of some coastal areas, New Guinea did not even appear on maps of the world. And here in the Highlands, there was no contact with the natives until the 20th century, 1930 to be precise, when Michael Leahy and Michael Dyer, searching for gold, climbed the eastern flanks and discovered 1 million people belonging to over 400 different tribes. This region is very rugged, with a series of mountains reaching heights of up to 4,000 meters and forming numerous valleys of dense vegetation, where the different ethnic groups live practically isolated from each other. The majority of the villages are inhabited by just one family or a single clan. The houses are made of bamboo with roofs of palm leaf. Yam, juca, maize and sweet potatoes make up their daily diet. The main source of protein comes from the pigs, which they take great care of. They live in an enclosure joined to the house and are the sign of their wealth. The house is divided into different rooms, compartments separated by walls of woven bamboo. Another source of protein is fish, which they catch in the many rivers in the region. Without a doubt, the rough highland terrain and the extremely warlike nature of these tribes, always in conflict with their neighbors, have contributed to the great ethnic variety we still find today. Each group decorates their bodies in different ways. specific, characteristic colors and designs. They paint themselves for many different ceremonies, but perhaps the most typical is the Sing Sing, a ceremony at which they dance and sing. Sing Sings are organized to celebrate many different things, though some take place on specific days each year, and for these many different tribes come together, arriving from even the most remote villages. Using the same colors, each one paints his face with his own design, almost always inherited from his ancestors, as are their headdresses, made from bird of paradise feathers. The bird of paradise is now a protected species and can only be hunted with bow and arrow before the Sing Sing. From the time the Spanish sailors took the feathers back to Europe in the 16th century, trade in these feathers was indiscriminate. All over the world they were greatly prized as decoration in theatre shows. The Highlander peoples are proud and maintain their customs and traditions. Despite the daily impact of Western influence, they never miss an opportunity to show off their feathers. One of the most numerous and most singular groups in the highlands are the Huli. They live in the western highlands around the city of Tari. Their first contact with white men on Australian patrol near the river Tagali was in 1935. They normally go bare-chested. They have belts made of fibers, and hanging from them there is always a hungoya, a knife made from the tibia bone of the cassowary, a flightless bird slightly smaller than the ostrich and which is very common in PNG. In their rituals, they paint their faces with red and yellow clay and vegetable dyes. At the initiation ceremony, a hole is drilled through the nose into which they will later insert pig's teeth, feathers, or small pieces of wood. Hanging from the back of their necks, the powerful hornbill beak symbolizes strength and courage in battle. Their large three-peaked hats are made with their own hair and decorated with flowers and cassowary feathers. The geography of the highlands and the constant battles between the different groups make communication very difficult. At the moment, access to the western region is impossible due to the wars among the tribes, which cause 5,000 deaths a year. But it has always been like this. Every village, every settlement has studied the best way to defend itself from neighboring clans or tribes. They have made the best bows, more effective spears, heavier, more solid axes and clubs, shields with which to protect themselves, systems of defense and attack, traps and ambushes. Perhaps the most ingenious of all are the Mudmen. They live near Goroka along the upper reaches of the Asado River, and hence they are also known as the Asado. Their strange means of defense is to turn into spirits and frighten off their enemies. For this they make these masks of mud which, with their grotesque, exaggerated features, look like galactic monsters from distant fictitious planets. The majority of the ethnic groups in the highlands believe in superhuman beings that live in the rivers, caves, the sky and the forests, and which intervene constantly and decisively in the lives of men. This is their religion, and they make offerings to ask for protection and to ward off misfortune. These supreme beings are called Dhamma. Between them and humans stand the Damini, the spirits of their forefathers. There is also a third group of beings called the Tomya, who live in objects like stones, necklaces, spears, etc., and cause illnesses and misfortunes. The sorcerers can turn these forces against other people in ceremonies called Puri Puri, which take place at night. Once they have finished their masks, the warriors daub their bodies with clay, which they will later dye grey with another more liquid type of mud. They also decorate their waists with ferns, which, spread with mud, take on an ethereal appearance, making the ghostly figures look even more convincing. Their mouths, noses, and ears are encrusted with pig's teeth, giving their fantastic creations an even more ferocious appearance. According to the legend, these methods of invoking the gods began a long time in the past. The Asado were being hunted by the most numerous of their enemies. Many people had died, and they were waiting the final attack. Then one of the ancients, a man called Pukido Pod, had a dream in which he saw the image of grey, terrifying spirits. That same night they made the first masks of mud. The men attached bamboo canes to their fingers like long fingernails and daubed their bodies with clay. Shortly before sunrise, in the shadows of the forest, the mud ghosts approached the enemy lines with slow, sinuous movements. When they saw them, their enemies fled, terrified, and the Asado were saved. In the highlands, the production of high-quality tea is being promoted. The heavy rains are good for this crop. Many highlanders work on these plantations, and so they are becoming part of the new economy. It remains to be seen if this is a good thing, or if it'll mean the destruction of their traditions, as in so many other places. Coffee of the Arabica type is also being strongly developed. Almost along the line of the equator, these highlands display a savage ferocity, chaotic landscapes which hide a sublime beauty. The subtle softness of the queen orchid along the tortuous path of the furrows etched deep into the land. This is a country of villages and village people who communicate by using an extraordinary repetitive cry. The women are in charge of the pigs, the true wealth of the Highlanders. Sometimes when they are breastfeeding their young children, the women will also suckle the young pigs. Fire has always been very important for these mountain peoples. They know how to light one, whatever the circumstances, and though now they can easily get matches or lighters, the Eneka show us how to light a fire in a matter of seconds, using just a few pieces of dry straw, a fine strip of bamboo, and a splintered trunk. Today they have gathered together to prepare mono. This is an ancient recipe and they all take part. It is a ritual and the traditions must be strictly adhered to. They make a large fire and place stones on it to heat up. These stones will later be placed in the hole which they will dig in the ground, and there the food will be cooked. Meanwhile, they get the food ready, they cut the squash, peel the yam and the sweet potatoes, clean the grim, a type of vegetable similar to spinach, and remove the leaves from the corn cobs. The monos, the main ingredient, are small sweet bananas which they scrape with a bamboo cane knife, shredding them into small pieces. Once cooked, this pulp will be of the texture of a thick sauce. Once they have finished digging, the hole is lined with grass and banana leaves so that the food does not touch the soil. Then they place the red-hot stones in layers, separated from the food with banana leaves. Yet another use for bamboo is to carry water from the river. The underground oven needs enough humidity to ensure that the food will be cooked without burning the leaves. This region of the highlands has always been self-sufficient. Before there was any contact with the outside world, the million natives that lived here got all the food they needed from the land. They traded among each other either by barter or using the kinas, shells of mother pearl made into crescent shapes which still today are very valuable. They wear them around their necks at the ceremonies and dances. Of lower value were the toras, circular seashells with a hole in the center, which were threaded to make necklaces. The official currency of PNG is now called the kina, divided into 100 toras. Bamboo is their most important raw material. They crush and peel the canes, then weave them together to make the walls and the floors of their houses. They also use bamboo to make their bows and arrows. Over 20 varieties of this flexible cane grow here, and it is also used to make kitchen utensils, knives, and even musical instruments, like this one, very similar to a Jew's harp. Each man takes care of his own weapons. From when they are children, they learn to make spears, bows, axes, and different types of arrows like this one with 3 tips, which is especially good for hunting birds. The string of their bows is also made from bamboo. A fine strip, slightly more than 1 centimeter in width, is softened over the fire and then fixed to the ends of the bow to give the necessary pressure. Two hours later, the primitive pressure cooker has done its job. The food is ready. Taking care not to burn themselves on the still hot stones, they take out each layer of leaves with the different foods ready to serve. The food is shared out equally following strict protocol. No one gets more, no one less. That could lead to serious conflict. We are going down the west side of the highlands. The landscape changes dramatically. The mountains give way to enormous valleys covered in conifers and pine trees, more like the forests of the Mediterranean and not these equatorial regions of Oceania. We are going to see the mummies of the Enga or Kuku Kuku. That is the name normally given to these people who live on the plains of the Aseki River. High up in the mountains where there is no vegetation, in a natural shelter which the natives call the Sacred Rock, the Enga mummies stand silently watching over the lives of the Kuku Kuku. Cannibalism has always been common practice among the Kuku Kuku, and it is this that has made them legendary. They ate thieves and prisoners of war after fattening them up. Charles Higginson was the first white man to come in contact with them in 1907. He described them as fierce cannibalistic warriors, always ready to start a war with a neighboring tribe. Leaders and warriors who died in battle were mummified. The body was placed in the fetal position in the kitchen and a fire was lit to smoke it. When it began to smell, the wives would rip the skin off and tear out the intestines, which were eaten by the closest relatives in order to acquire the qualities of the deceased. Then they continued smoking the body for 4 or 5 months until the flesh was totally dried out. It would then be taken up to the Sacred Rock and placed in a sitting position, looking into the distance, or in a type of bamboo basket which they nailed to the ground. Other tribes left them hanging from the trees. Very few Kuku Kuku now mummify their dead, but they have lost none of their warlike nature and tribal conflicts are still frequent. Cannibalism has almost entirely died out, though there are still isolated cases of human flesh being eaten in the most remote regions. We must understand that for these warriors just 15 or 20 years ago, cannibalism was perfectly normal. The land where the Kuku Kuku live is very rugged and covered in jungle, but even here we find representatives of the most radical religious sects from the West. They are everywhere. In Papua there are over 100 different churches. They started coming in the 50s when in Papua New Guinea there were still around 2 million natives living practically in the Stone Age. This was a valuable prize. Missionaries from the different sects came with their Western beliefs and gods, frantically vying with each other to convert the heathens. Tragically, this has led to the loss of ancient customs and ways of life. Again in the highlands, we have come to witness a compensation meeting. After the requisite greetings, the two tribes sit down facing each other along the mountain terrace. The tribe on the left have to pay compensation to the other tribe. One of them killed a man from the other tribe, and they're now going to discuss how much they will have to pay his family. Each group has its own interpreter, who understands either the language of the other tribe or Pidgin, the lingua franca, which is spoken by more and more people. It is the only way to communicate in a country with over 800 different languages. Every day across the whole country, there are to decide compensation. People go to them with axes, machetes and bows. If an agreement is not reached, it might turn into a bloody fight. There are more and more deaths because in tribal battles firearms are increasingly replacing the traditional bows and spears. They may talk for hours or even days discussing the quantity of kinas or the number of pigs the injured family should receive. But in the end, they almost always come to an agreement. An important institution for these peoples is the Tanimet, or courting ceremony. This man dressed in huge feathers is the matchmaker, and he's in charge of the courting ceremonies. A Tanimet can last for days or weeks. The men invite the women from a different village. The Highlander culture is exogamous. It is forbidden to marry relatives, and so they have to look for wives outside their own village. Men can have as many wives as they can support, but the women can only have one husband. The songs speak of love affairs and list the obligations of the future spouses. Following the indications of the matchmaker and under the watchful eye of the older women who have brought the girls here, the men constantly move around courting all the women. They cross their legs and take hold of each other's hands. They are all wearing their finest traditional clothes and wear provocative makeup. Both the man and the woman must agree before the matchmaker will give his consent. The wedding is very simple. The two families get together and the groom pays the dowry to the parents of the bride. From 15 to 30 pigs, domestic utensils, and a few kinas, which the bride will attach to her dress. Once the dowry has been handed over, The bride and groom and the bride's family go to her village.
Manistafada Puro Bilarizai Yahud Besairi Walbadiniman Waliazikhamat.
In the north of Papua New Guinea, we find a very different region to the highlands, around the Sepik River, which flows from west to east. It is 1,126 kilometers long, and its basin covers 78,000 square kilometers. It is a river of deep, slow-running waters, and it carries enormous quantities of mud. When it flows into the Bismarck Sea, its brown waters stain the sea for miles out. Human activity in the basin of the Sepik River goes back around 40,000 years. About 200 different languages are now spoken here. The first contacts with foreigners were with the Chinese or Malaysians who came to hunt for the birds of paradise. In 1885, the German zoologist Finch was the first European to reach Sepik, and he called it the Kaiserin Augusta in honor of the wife of the German emperor. Despite the fact that there are hundreds of different tribes, they do have some common characteristics. One of these is the enormous houses they build, and for this bamboo is the most important material. With strips of bamboo, they tie and join the frame and make the floor. The walls and roof are made with bark from palm trees and banana trees. On the outside of the house, the effigy of the family spirit protects those who live there. Several generations of the family live in the same house. They only build a new house when they need more space. Fish is their main source of protein. The river has an enormous variety of fish. Many species have been introduced recently, like these introduced from Africa and which have rapidly increased in numbers. They trade in dry fish with the other tribes from the north of the island to the highlands. This is also the land of the crocodile men, the sacred animal of the Sepik. The spiritual life of these people is centered on the tambaran or house of the spirits. The drawings represent gods shown in their dreams and going about their daily lives. The greatest god of all is the crocodile, the king of the river. The tambaran itself is built in the shape of its powerful jaws. The tambarans, also called boathouses, are generally in the center of the village. They are large, up to 40 meters long, and are generally in places where the waters do not reach, even when the rivers flood. Women are forbidden to enter. Inside, the men meet to invoke the spirits and to take decisions which will affect the community. On special occasions, they get together dressed in traditional costumes and dance around the tambaran, and this way they call on the spirits that protect them. From within the tambaran comes the magic music that tells the dancers what they must do. Inside the house of the spirits, the initiated beat the garamut, a kind of enormous tom-tom, and play the ritual flutes. These calm waters of the Sepik hide a mortal danger. In PNG, there are two species of crocodile, the New Guinea crocodile, which can be up to 4 meters long, and the marine crocodile, which is the largest crocodile in the world. It can grow to over 7 meters and can live in both freshwater and seawater. In captivity, there have been examples of crocodiles weighing over a ton. They are naturally aggressive, true man-eaters. This crocodile is worshipped in Sepik. This is the best conserved region of Papua. It is a bird paradise. As there are no roads or paths, humans have had less impact. Sagu, from which they make bread, is the daily food for these people. This is a palm tree from the trunk of which they extract a starch which increases enormously in volume when cooked. To obtain the starch, they wash the crushed pith, which they then pass through a sieve. Each tree gives between 300 and 350 kilos of sagu. When it is dry, they grate it and obtain a flour which they use to make bread. In the Sepik River, a spectacular phenomenon occurs. Islands are formed which float and move with the current. They are sometimes so big that they form natural dams. The water has to flow around them, creating a vast, rapidly changing network of canals and lagoons. There are thousands of water hyacinths in the river, and they accumulate in the pools and lagoons, forming vast extensions where it is virtually impossible to see the water. The natives are always aware of the state of the canals and where it is possible to navigate, though with great difficulty. The hyacinths have large hairy roots which, crossing and intertwining, reach down into the mud of the river. They can form large solid platforms on which grasses and bushes then grow. Parts break off and become floating islands. As these plants rot, tannic acid is formed, giving the river the color of strong tea. These waters are called the black waters. Magic is always present here in Sepik. Everything that happens is a direct result of the action of the spirits. When someone believes he has been the victim of a spell, he goes to see the specialists who will get together in the Tambaran and invoke the protective spirits. They eat large quantities of betel, a stimulant which helps them go into a trance. When the moment is right, the Tonoko will cut the spell with an axe. In the village of Timbumeri on the southern shore of Lake Chambri, the Garamut tom-toms sound out announcing the initiation ceremony of the crocodile men. From dawn, all the men of the village start work preparing the ritual. By the river beside the Tambaran, they build a crocodile nest. They remove mud with buckets to make sure the water drums are deep enough and enclose the area with palm leaves and banana leaves. The uninitiated and the women are not allowed to see what happens inside this area. Meanwhile, the young fashion shapes from palm trees, representing the heads of these sacred reptiles. They decorate them with strips of palm, cut into the shape of crocodile tails, and with flowers and leaves. The walls of the enclosure are closely woven. From outside, no one can see what is happening inside the area which represents the heart of the spirit of the king of crocodiles. Inside, they make sure that the palm trunk, which will represent the reptile's tail, moves properly. When the tambaran has also been hidden behind branches of a palm tree and banana tree, the preparations are complete. The men of these societies in Sepik subject themselves to real torture. With several hundred cuts, their skin takes on the appearance of that of their reptilian gods. The incisions around the nipples represent the eyes of the crocodile. Those on the shoulders, the torso, the upper arm, and the back symbolize other parts of the crocodile's body. As soon as the sun sets, the enormous Garamuts announce the start of the ceremony. Our cameras move through the branches of the crocodile nest. Inside, 7 naked men exhibit the 2 water drums, feminine and masculine. Soon the heart of the king of the crocodiles starts to beat. This sound imitates that of the powerful reptiles. Outside, dozens of warriors dance to the beat. In unison, they shout encouragement to their god who moves his palm tree tail in approval. initiated always watch the performance from a distance, moved by the strange sounds they hear. They truly believe these sounds emanate from another world. The warrior chief beats the ground with his ceremonial tail. From the nest, the water drums reply. All the elements must be coordinated so the spirit of the king of crocodiles will come and possess the initiated. They believe that in the beginning there was only water. The crocodile then created the earth and formed an enormous crack in it. The crocodile then fertilized it and gave rise to all the species of the earth. He then opened his mouth, and from his upper jaw came the sky, and from the lower jaw, the ground. The initiate is led into the Tambaran. On this occasion, it is a man who had already been initiated but had lived for many years outside his community. Now, by means of sacrifice, he publicly reaffirms that he belongs here and wishes to rid himself of the outside influences that have contaminated him. Outside, the warriors continue to shout encouragement to the Great Spirit. Soon, purifying blood will be spilt. Lying on a board and aided by an acolyte, the initiate awaits the contact of the knife. He will have eaten narcotic plants which daze him and dull the pain, though on this occasion his skin will be scarred with only the final few cuts of confirmation. The wounds are covered with mud and with guac, a vegetable oil with powerful antiseptic properties. The result will be scars in the form of scales. The initiate is led to the nest of the Great Spirit. He is now a crocodile man. Tradition has been followed. The symbiosis of man and reptile keeps alive the ancestral codes of the great river of black waters.